Welcome to the Peep Show podcast.
Your glance at sex and social justice.
With Jesse and PJ Sage. Welcome back to another episode of the Peep Show podcast. This week we wrap up our coverage of the 2019 Adult Entertainment Expo and Adult Video Network Awards, looking specifically at the history of the event and the way it's changed over the last 35 years. We interview porn performer Nina Hartley, writer and academic Lynn Comella, and cam model Miss Lollipop, who all offer unique perspectives on the event.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Peep Show podcast.
Welcome.
Today we're going to bring you the last of our AVN coverage.
Yeah, with really great interviews.
Yeah, it was really fun. We collected 2 of these while we were there at the event, and then we followed up with Miss Lollipop later in a phone interview, and we got some really interesting, different perspectives on how the event has changed over time.
Yeah, I mean, we've only been there 2 years in a row now. Last year wasn't that significantly different than it was this year, so it was neat to talk to people who've been there for much longer and see what their perspective is.
Yeah, I mean, Nina Hartley's been going for 35 years. That's crazy.
It is crazy. You're not even 35 yet.
I feel like you're outing me. Let's not make this about me. It's about Nina Hartley.
Oh, okay. All right. Anyways, yeah, she's been going for 35 years. I think that Lynn Comella's been going for 13 years or something like that. And Miss Lollipop for 7 or 8. So we have pretty broad perspectives.
Yeah, pretty good range of perspectives, and also looking at it from different levels. So, from the perspective of a mainstream porn performer, and then from a cam model, and then from a writer who's really focused on it from the industry side, and particularly with interest in quote-unquote adult novelties, sex toys.
Yeah, that was really interesting.
So yeah, a lot of diversity of experience mixed in this episode. I think it's really cool, and frankly, I learned a lot talking to these folks.
Yeah, absolutely. We are happy that we can bring you another episode from AVN. We also wanted to reiterate again how appreciative we are for all of the people who helped get us to AVN to put this episode together, and the last episode as well.
I can't believe how much people came through for us. We raised over $1,000 between our Patreon and GoFundMe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which was really, really amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, so we were able to bring you this really cool coverage, and we also have made a bunch of connections in the process that are definitely going to show up in future episodes that we have planned. Mm-hmm. So it was really, really exciting to be there and to be able to bring you, all these different voices and do what we do here at Peep Show.
Yeah, and I also want to thank people from the bottom of my heart for sending me to a place where I can have rolled tacos with guacamole. Really, I do.
Pretty much, I think Jesse would eat at, what is it, Roberto's?
Yeah. Roberto's.
2 meals a day, every day while we're in Vegas, if she could get away with it.
I think I more or less did that. No, I grew up in San Diego, and in San Diego, they have all of these hole-in-the-wall taco shops, and they all end in Berto's, like Roberto's, Filiberto's. There's a whole bunch of these shops, and they were my favorite growing up, and we don't have those here. I mean, we have tacos in Pittsburgh, but they're like not anywhere near the same. So Vegas is close enough to San Diego that as soon as I landed, I started salivating and imagining like hot sauce that would burn my mouth.
Sometimes you're weird.
And it was just as amazing as it was in my imagination. So thank you. Yeah, that was the best part. I mean, AVN was cool and all, but my mouth burned with like authentic hot sauce. And for that, I love you guys.
Well, on that important note, why don't we go ahead and get to our interviews?
Okay, that sounds great. We're here with Nina Hartley, and we would love to talk to you about how AVN has changed. How long have you been coming here?
This is my 35th consecutive one.
Wow, you haven't missed one in 35 years?
I've not missed one in 35 years.
Wow, so tell us a little bit about how it's evolved.
where do I start? Certainly size, sheer scope of it. In the beginning, the adult section was a small part of the Consumer Electronics Show, the CES show, up on the top floor of the Sahara Hotel, and the CES ticket got you everywhere. Then over the years, I saw it develop into its own convention that was overlapping the CES, but it's a separate ticket. Then now, a few years ago, it's separated completely from CES, and now it's its own convention, the Adult Entertainment Expo. In the beginning, you couldn't sell anything off the floor. Now we can sell stuff. If I had thought to bring movies, I could have sold movies.
Okay, yeah.
I could be selling 8x10s. I could be selling old magazines. I could be selling stuff. Cam girls are eating everything. As studios die, the desire for consumers for adult content is not going away. Now the delivery system is different, and the power system is different, and the money system is different. So digital world killed the business as I knew it, right? But it sort of had to die because it was very closed off. If a company owner didn't like you, you didn't get hired. So what I like about it now, for an entrepreneurial model, it's the best time to be an adult model now. Because if you have a modem, a computer, and a phone or a camera, you're good to go. You can be your own boss and make your own rules and work with who you want to work with and travel, do everything you want to do if you're good at self-management. Now, some people aren't meant to be their own bosses, and that's a little bit difficult. But if you're good at being your own boss and like independence, you don't mind being chief cook, bottle washer, manager, agent, booker, you are incredibly able to be independent as a woman. I don't know the gay side very well, but as a female model, if you have oomph or get up and go-ness or a lot of self-discipline, you can be your own boss and never have to say yes sir to anybody. All any model needs in the whole world is 50 guys to give them $100 a month each. With all the modems out there and all the credit cards, you can do that. So if you're a traditionally beautiful girl, of course you get a lot of attention right away. But the cool thing about camming is that the more out there or extreme or unusual your look or your thing is, it may take you longer to find your audience, but fetish audiences are very, very loyal. And so once they find the woman who does that thing, he will never leave. So I love the mismatched boobs. I love the green, whatever your thing is. So only our authentic selves can be happy. And that goes double when it comes to sex. And so what I want to tell young models is find what you think is sexy and work that. I know models, cam models, who have been working for years and have never, ever, ever had anyone else on camera with them. A little red bunny. She's a solo cam model. She goes all over the world. She has thousands and thousands of fans, and she's never even had to lay a finger on anybody. She traveled, and she's her own boss. Okay. Wow. Safe. They don't know where she lives. She's on a computer, and wow, that was not an option when I started. So
if it was, do you think you would have gone that route?
I so can't imagine what it would be like to be born in 1985. Or 1990. I can't even. So I'm trying to think of who I was shaped so much by the 70s and by the human potential movement and by the leftist politics of the time. I'm a red diaper baby. However, if the same genetic package was born, yes, I would still be kinky. I'd still be bisexual. I'd still be exhibitionistic. I'd still be non-monogamous, but I don't know what I would have done with it. If I was 25 years old today, I probably would find my way here somehow because these are my people. I love working in a world where I get to be naked and I get to talk about sex and get to teach people about sex. I get to have a lot of sex without having to date people. So adult entertainment, for me, has been very, very fantastic. But I started at a much slower time, much smaller, and the business growing around me. I mean, I was to say within it. And some of these young women are just like, damn, okay, you on it. You are on it. I'm so impressed. I'm so impressed with the younger women today. And that being said, there's always going to be a solid 20% of women in the business who are just the clueless little bunny you think that the stereotype used to be, who probably shouldn't be here. Because for me, porn is a bad place to be if personally you harbor traditional views about sex and gender roles. It can be very damaging to people who still hold old-fashioned ideas about what sex is for, because it's especially in the gender split down. So those kinds of people think, all men want from women is sex, and it's a commodity. But unfortunately, of all the jobs, it's one thing to have a soul-killing job. But at least you can go home and wank off. It's very bad when your soul-killing job is wanking off. And so I always want to encourage people who are in porn but don't like it to leave. To please go now and find any other soul-killing job so that you can just go home and replenish your soul through masturbation. When your sex life is your job instead of your respite from your job, it takes this very special person to be able to do sex work. It helps to be non-traditional in your belief system about sexuality. It's helpful to be open-minded. It's helpful to be a little freaky, because let's face it, even if you're alone with the camera, it's a camera, and other people on the other side of the camera. Yeah. It's not regular.
Right.
But I love sex work. If I had to go back and do it again, I'd still pick porn. I would do the business a little differently. I would have broken up with my first husband sooner. I would have taken a better interest in business sooner. Yeah. If I had to do it over again, but it still would have been porn.
Thank you. It's really nice to hear from you.
Yeah, and also just really interesting. I actually didn't even know any of the history about CES or anything. Yeah. It's really great to come here and have that kind of perspective of somebody who's been seeing this develop.
Well, now, of course, CES, they gave a design innovation for a female sex product, and they took it away because it was obscene.
I heard about that.
So straight people still have trouble with what we do. But you can follow me on Twitter at NinaLand, and on Instagram, Miss_Nina_Hartley. And my new Safe for Work site, Nina.live.
Thanks so much.
You bet.
We're here with Lynn Comella. We are actually standing in line for press passes for the red carpet. So there's a lot of madness around us, but we're happy to talk to you here.
Thanks for having me, and this is really fun. I've never done an interview from the middle of the Hard Rock, like on the night of the AVN Awards, so I'm all for it.
It's fun. It adds to the excitement. So we actually really wanted to talk to you about the fact that you've been here for the last 12 years and get a sense kind of how it's changed over time.
Yeah, I think it's changed a lot. I mean, and I reflect on that every year that I come. How is it different from the year before, and what do those differences have to say about this rapidly transforming industry? But the first show that I attended was 2008. So this is my 12th show, and 2008 was so different. It was at a different venue. It was at the Sands Expo and Convention Center. It was a much bigger venue. It was a separate show from CES, but it still took place at the same time as CES, so there was a lot of crossover between the Adult Entertainment Expo and the Consumer Electronics Show. But the show itself was much, much bigger, and if you look back to 2008, this was an era that was right on the cusp of the big economic downturn. Piracy was just starting to affect the industry, and free tube sites were also a relatively new thing. So it was right at that moment when things started to kind of shrink and truncate, including profitability. So the industry was really trying to figure itself out. So those were some larger forces that were going on, but the show itself looked different because the businesses that were attending were really different. It was still the era of big studios, and those big studios had mega booths. They had a huge presence, and some of those same companies don't even exist today, and still others are still around, but they've just opted out of buying the expensive real estate on the trade show floor. So they're here in kind of the scheme of existing in the adult industry, but they're no longer a presence at this particular show.
I'm curious what you think about the people who are being represented now. So there has been a big shift from like the studio performers to cam models and clip producers, but I'm wondering how you're seeing that reflected in who's here.
Yeah, I mean, that has been a super duper interesting transformation. I remember about 3 years ago when you started to see the cam models actually working from the trade show floor. It was new, it was novel, and if you had never been to an AVN before, you may have thought that that's the way the show always was. But it was a really powerful visual representation of the economic shift in the industry. That the power brokers were now the digital platforms and the cam companies, and they were bringing that power to the trade show floor. And it wasn't just that the cam models were represented and the companies were represented, they were also some of the major sponsors of the show. So I think it's been really interesting in terms of a kind of democratization of who counts as an adult performer or as an adult star, right? It's not just a select few, quote-unquote, contract girls or contract performers. So I think the democratization has been interesting. And there's always the performance of labor at an adult industry trade show, but the performance of labor is different because it's not just models or performers signing autographs and posing for photos. It's actually kind of cam models working. I mean, they're talking to press like me, or they're talking to fans, but they're also simultaneously online talking to clients and kind of earning a living. So there are all of these levels. That shift has been really interesting to observe. And I guess the other thing that I want to say about representation really quickly is back in 2008, 9, 10, 11, there was such a really visible representation of feminist and queer entrepreneurs, in terms of porn producers and directors and performers and retailers and sex toy manufacturers. So over the past 12 years, one of the things that's really shrunk at the show is the adult novelty segment of the show, where a lot of major and more progressive adult sex toy manufacturers are now opting to go to the AMNI show, the Adult Novelty Manufacturers Expo, which happens in January and July. So 12 years ago, back in the day, it feels like, there was a much bigger adult novelty industry presence here, and over the years, that just became smaller and smaller and smaller. So, for example, you don't see companies like Fun Factory or Tantus or many, many other kind of bigger manufacturers, as well as like the retailers and their buyers. They now go to this Adult Novelty Manufacturing Expo in Burbank in January and July. So that's also a part of the show that's really changed. But in kind of the era of 2008 to 2011, it really did feel like feminist and queer segments of the adult industry were kind of moving from the margins into the mainstream just by virtue of their visibility at this trade show. And, year after year, fewer and fewer of them came. And I feel that's been a big shift too, that you just don't see that presence on the panels anymore, even. I mean, I remember when there were panels, the business of women and what do women want. And those panels were populated with Shine Louise Houston and Rachel Venning, who formerly owned Babeland, and Jackie Strano from Good Vibrations. I mean, there was such a kind of diverse, queer, feminist presence on those panels. Tristan Taramino, used to kind of be here. So part of me waxes nostalgic, and I'm certainly not saying that there's not a queer and feminist presence at this show in 2019, but there was this moment where there were feminist sex educators that were being hired to do educational seminars, and it really felt like we were on the cusp of a really wonderful transformation and integration. But at the end of the day, I think that those entities didn't really feel like they were being adequately supported or representative. And one by one, they just kind of opted to go to other shows or to maybe stop going to shows. And that makes me a little sad. Those are my own personal biases in terms of just my utopian image of a kind of an industry where there's much more synergy between the main, quote-unquote, mainstream and feminist and queer.
Going to add to that it seems to me like even though there's like a lot of rhetoric about the diversity of bodies and gender representation and age and size, that actually when you look around at the bodies that are being presented are the conventionally attractive, cis, thin women, which I mean, I'm not saying anything negative about them. It's good for them to be here too, but you don't see a range or a diversity.
Well, when you say being presented, though, you mean in terms of who's winning awards at the show or who's being featured in the promotional materials by AVN itself. But, I mean, in contrast, when you look again into those camming booths or the booths of the clip sites, I mean, you do see a great deal of diversity. I just don't think it's
being platformed in panels or at the awards or in the promotional materials. So it is here. I mean, it's definitely here. It's just like, what kind of validation is it receiving?
So one of the things that I like to do is go to the industry seminars, because you do hear industry people talking to each other about the state of the industry. And at one of the panels that I attended, I was really struck by the fact that the moderator, who was a white man, was kind of bragging about how, quote unquote, diverse the panel was. And I'm looking at this all-white panel, and there were men and there were like 2 women. And I thought it was a really interesting moment to think about what diversity in the industry means to people, because in this sense, diversity just meant it was a diverse representation from different segments, right? That it was of the industry. It wasn't diverse in terms of race or gender or sexual orientation or even really life experience, but it was just that we have one person who works for this company, one who works for this company, one who works for another company, and I'm like, that's a real failure to adequately conceptualize diversity and inclusion on this one panel. And, you know, in 2019, I would really think that we're beyond having to point that out to people who are organizing the panels or suggesting panel participants. And it's not okay to have a panel devoted to diversity and inclusion on one day, and then the following day have a panel where someone is bragging about how diverse it is when it's quite the opposite. And those kinds of things increasingly stand out to me because it's such a juxtaposition, you know, that is hard to miss unless you're sitting there with your eyes closed. So, you know, what has changed has been interesting to note, and what hasn't changed as much as you would maybe hope it would change in 12 years has also been interesting to note. So I think the changes have been in terms of the companies that are represented, and that really reflects the changing economic structure of the industry, changes in terms of who gets to kind of claim a kind of star status. That has become much more democratized in certain ways, and then changes in terms of what types of conversations are having. And that's particularly true around, you know, digitization, right? I mean, that's the main conversation that's happening now, how to kind of use the digital space to create not just innovative content, but innovative content that consumers are willing to pay for. Perennial question that companies grapple with.
That's a good place to end. Where can people find your other work?
Oh, my other work. Thanks for asking. They can check out lyncomella.com, which is my website, which has a lot of information about me and my academic work. They can also check out my book, which came out last year, Vibrator Nation, How Feminist Sex Toy Stores Changed the Business of Pleasure. And then I also have a co-edited volume with my colleague Shira Tarrant called New Views on Pornography, Sexuality, Politics, and the Law. So those are just a few places to find some of my work.
All right, so we have Miss Lollipop with us today. We wanted to talk to you about AVN and how long you've been going and what sort of changes you've seen. So when was your first AVN?
So my first AVN was 2011.
Oh, okay, so you've been going, I guess, 8 years, 9 years?
8 years.
What was your first year like, actually? Let's start there.
So my first year, I went to something called the Cam Girl Mansion, which was like an event for a whole bunch of cam girls to get together, and we all went as a group.
Okay.
So that made it a lot less intimidating to go for my first year. I'm really glad I did that.
Did you stay somewhere that wasn't the Hard Rock?
Yeah, I only started staying in the Hard Rock the last couple years because MFC the campsite that I work for started giving discounts because it's ridiculously expensive to stay in the Hard Rock otherwise.
Yeah. Right.
Previous years, I did that event. They rented a house and they had 20-something cam girls in there.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was a pretty big event for a while. And then after that, I would usually just rent an Airbnb or something like that and fill it with like cam girls. Yeah. So I'd have like 6 or 7 cam girls and it would only cost, $200 $8 for like a week or something per room. So
Right.
it turned out being pretty affordable, and you would just pay for like Ubers, or in our case, we'd usually rent a car.
So in the mansion that you stayed in the first year and then in those Airbnbs, were folks going to make content?
Yeah, I think it like varied. Some years I did like the Airbnbs where I was organizing it with a little bit more structure. So yeah, it was definitely like we were going to cam and make content. And then the convention, we would go in pairs or in groups. The last year, it was more just like a home base for a bunch of people, and everyone was doing their own thing. So I've definitely done it both ways.
And then the last few years you've been staying in the Hard Rock.
Yeah, so this was my third year staying in the Hard Rock, 2019.
So tell us what it was like to show up at the actual convention the first time.
Basically, I made a connection with another model named Scarlett Raven at the mansion, and she had done conventions before, so she just sort of took me under her wing. We all went in a limo. I remember that. And so it was like kind of like a big deal, like getting out of a limo with like 20 chicks.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know, like I'm trying to remember back to like that first time. I definitely didn't have any regulars that had showed up to see me or anything. And so I work for MFC, My Free Cams. There was no like sign-in process. There was no model lounge. There was none of that. You would just kind of show up. There'd be some security at the booth and maybe one staff member hovering around. And you would bring your own internet. They didn't provide any internet.
How did you bring your own internet?
You would use a hotspot.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But it would be really difficult.
Yeah.
Plus, it would eat up like a shit ton of data.
Yeah, I mean, that was always a thing. But I used to cam outdoors a lot and like in my car a lot. So I already had that kind of set up.
Yeah.
You use about a gigabyte every couple hours. So it'd work out. But yeah, and there would be like a box of T-shirts under the booth that you would rifle through and grab. And that was the swag.
Yeah. At that point, cam sites didn't have like the real estate that they do now, huh?
Oh no, yeah, like there was one booth and it was a good deal smaller. It was still like a long booth, but it was just that one long booth, and that was it. And I don't recall there being other, like Chatterbait wasn't even in existence.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't recall any other major campsites being there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was still like more mainstream stuff, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What has been the biggest changes at AVN over the last 8 years?
Definitely the campsites taking over.
Yeah.
Like the cam booths and everything. I guess for me, the changes that have like affected me are more like the ways that the campsites cater to the models. It's because now like they provide a lot of incentives for us to come. They have better swag. They have better security. They feed us. They give us hotel discounts, that kind of stuff. They put on massive parties every night. So there's a lot more there for models to come to versus before you were kind of doing it on your own.
Yeah,
Right.
It sounds like you guys self-organized a lot of what was going on.
Yeah, you absolutely did. Like I used to do member meetups. I did a dinner party one year where I would do a whole bunch of my members in my room would get together, and we they paid for tickets and I would take them out to a restaurant. We did a night out on the strip where I hired, not on the strip, but we went down to Fremont Street, but I hired like a party bus and everything.
Oh,
and had a bunch of models. Yeah, like I used to put on like events that people would buy tickets to.
Wow.
And so that sounds like a big shift because now the sites themselves are doing a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. The other thing that used to happen that the sites changed, or at least MFC changed, was the model parties used to be able to bring a partner, like a male partner, and now it's models only.
Oh,
so
wow.
that totally changed the vibe of those parties.
What was the reason for that change?
I think they wanted it to be more exclusive. They were taking more pictures, right? So pictures were being posted, and there's an issue with consent where you've got people that are not registered models.
Yeah.
And then I would imagine that people were letting members in, because if you think about it, you could easily sell a ticket.
Right. Yeah.
And then these parties, they, like there were naked girls everywhere in the hot tub. Like it was definitely like an exclusive party with most of like the top MFC models. So I would imagine that would be something that was highly lucrative.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. So people would just take a member as their plus one.
Exactly. Yeah. I never ran into that myself, but I would imagine it was happening.
Sure.
Right.
Sure. How about the vibe itself? I mean, is that, you said it's more exclusive, but has that changed the way that models network at those events, or?
Yeah, I mean, the networking is a lot better. Like, it's just more opportunities for that. They didn't even let us in the awards. So I only started going to the awards the last couple of years since MFC started doing that, because it was like $300 to buy a ticket, you know?
Right.
And I wasn't going to do that.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess, yeah, the vibe has changed. You can go to AVNs now just to party if you wanted to. There are definitely models that show up and never even touch the convention floor.
Right.
Has there been a difference in fans? Has there been more fans of cam models who've been coming?
Yeah, I would say so. There's always like the hardcore ones that come every year, but I would say that there's definitely more. I have less conversations with random people that have no idea what I do, and more conversations with people that have like seen me on the site.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, whether it's to do with like me just becoming more known over the years, or whether it's to do with AVN, but I definitely have like a group of usually 5 or 6 people at my booth.
Yeah.
At the area where I'm at, and they're like there.
Right.
They just hang out with you?
Yeah, I actually kind of like it. I think it's really important when I go to AVN to kind of set my intentions.
Yeah.
So like, if I'm going to do content, if I'm going to network, if I'm going to cam, if whatever those intentions are, I kind of like lay them out. And one thing I'm not good at is talking to strangers and making new clients. That's not how I'm not good at it. And I don't think AVN is the best place to do that.
Right.
So I kind of like them standing in front of me, because it gives kind of a wall that people have to get through if they want to come talk to me.
Right. And there's already like a familiarity between you and them.
Yeah, that I like. I like to go to meet the people that I already know.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes
as far
a lot
as
of
like
sense.
the fans, like inside the convention feels a lot safer. Outside the convention, it has felt progressively less safe each year, like in the casino.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what sort of things have you seen?
Well, not this year, but last year I had to push a guy into the wall in the elevator.
Oh my God.
Jeez.
Yeah.
What happened?
It was so it was just me and another model were in the elevator going up to the model floor, and a bunch of guys I think it was like 3 guys got in, and I think they asked us who gives the best blowjob. And then I can't remember exactly what happened, but he reached towards my friend, and that was her first time, and she was like, "What the fuck is happening?" And I just backed him up into the wall and said, I don't remember what I said, but
yeah,
he got the picture, and they got off the elevator in a hurry.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there were definitely instances where like models, I had to go to security this year as I was walking back to my room, and have somebody walk me back into the elevator and then put me in an elevator by myself because a guy was tailing me.
Oh,
wow.
jeez.
Yeah.
And then I had an experience where I walked a girl to her car, and I knew I was walking back across the casino floor, and it was in the evening, and there was just like a sea of men. Like, it's a weird experience, but there's just like a sea of men that you have to walk through.
Yeah.
And I knew this was going to happen, and I was dressed like, I wasn't like in slut clothes, but I was in like tight pants and a cute MFC tank top or something.
Right.
And I just pulled my phone out and I started recording, and 3 people grabbed me, and each time I just like stuck the camera in their face.
Wow. Yeah.
And they backed off. But yeah, like the casino is definitely not a safe environment.
Yeah.
Now, you said that you feel safe inside the convention. Has that changed over time? Is it?
Yeah, I would say I feel safer now than I did before. I think the security's gotten better, and I don't know, I guess there's just more like campsite members. MFC has like definitely pushed like an idea of community for the last few years, and whether or not that's working 100%, I don't know. But as far as models watching out for each other and stuff, I see that happening more in the convention than it used to.
That seems important. It kind of also raises this question for me. I mean, since you were attending AVN in kind of the early days of campsites when they were just really breaking onto the scene, what was that like interacting with mainstream porn fans and maybe even mainstream porn performers? Was there like kind of a culture clash or anything?
Yeah, I don't know, like, because I did kind of avoid interactions to a certain extent, but the ones that I had, I do remember one guy that I still wonder if he was a cop, but I think a lot of the people that I talked to were expecting that I would be offering in-room stuff, dancing, escorting things like that. And that, isn't something I offer, but that seemed to be like an expectation. I got asked several times the first couple years if I did dancing, like if I could go up to the hotel room and do like a private dance, whatever the hell that means.
Yeah, right.
And there did seem to be like confusion when I said I wouldn't. And I do remember, and I still see it sometimes with people that are obviously not campsite members, as they're walking past the booth and we're talking to our cameras more than to them. That seems to be like a moment of like, what are they doing?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like a lot of people that we've talked to have talked about the fact that there seems to be like a culture clash between cam models and their clients and fans and conventional porn models and their clients and fans.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I also think like porn models don't quite always know what to do with cam models.
Yeah.
I've seen some nasty comments on Twitter and things like that.
Right.
I mean, it's interesting because the awards are largely centered on mainstream performers.
Yeah. We have to wait for ages for the CAM awards, and there's only a couple.
Yet, ironically, it's sponsored by a campsite.
Yeah, I find that weird. I mean, they did have the awards presented by a CAM model last year.
Yeah, so I guess that's kind of a step in the direction of recognition, but
yeah,
it is a bit odd because when you are on the convention floor and just looking at all of the sponsorships, the campsites are even, the DIY clip sites are pretty heavily represented, but then still just the awards and kind of what gets the attention is just the lingering kind of mainstream sites and booths, which there's not very many of.
I think maybe part of that is to do with like just like the fact that the people that are giving the awards and the circle of people that are involved in that tend to be the agencies and the mainstream stuff. And when you're an independent cam girl or cam model or independent clip producer, you don't necessarily have access to those kinds of groups of people. So your name doesn't pop up, I guess.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I think that's legit.
I think a lot of that is just networking and who you know.
Right.
Yeah.
It's somewhat interesting, though, because you would think that the sites that are sponsoring all of this stuff would pressure for more inclusion.
I don't know why they don't do that. I mean, I've never won an award for anything.
Right.
Ever. Like on Camland, like at all. A lot of it you have to put yourself forward for. But people are sometimes surprised because I do have quite a big presence that I've never won any, like not necessarily an AVN, but like some of the smaller awards, like I've never pushed for anything, and I feel like if you don't push, you don't get.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that seems right.
But it also seems odd that people have been, working in the industry for a long time and are highly recognized and have a lot of followers, that a lot of the people who are more on the DIY side of the industry aren't even getting like red carpet invites or anything. Like they're.
Yeah. I did, like a couple of my cam girl friends did get on the red carpet this year. They had to like put themselves forward under a producer, and their producer is a cam model that runs a studio called Cam Girl Dollhouse, and it's a studio on ManyVids.
Right.
And they and it's not like a traditional studio by any means. Basically, they put on events and they do trade content.
Right. But they kind of figured out how to game the system in that way.
Yeah, essentially. And so because of that, she could put herself and her partner, I think, on the red carpet. So that's what they did. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is really interesting, but it still feels kind of exceptional, which again is odd because when you walk around the convention floor, it's like 50% campsites or something, and yet the red carpet is like 95% mainstream performers.
Yeah, I'm really curious. I've never done like some of the other conventions like Expo and some of the other award shows. I've never really done any of those, but I'm planning on, because I'm moving to Florida, I'm planning on doing, I think, Expos and CammingCon. I'm going to be like really curious to see whether, from what I see online, I think the campsites are a little bit better represented for the award shows.
Yeah, way better.
Well, at Expos Miami for sure, because that's what they're focusing on.
That's what they're focusing on, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It's almost exclusively cam stuff, kind of the opposite.
So I should definitely go to that, huh?
You should.
Yeah, we went the last 2 years, and it's really nice because it's all cam and it's no fans. It's just networking with other cam models.
Yeah.
Sounds really good. Yeah, I definitely think that's on my list.
Sitting by the pool and doing workshops, and it's really nice.
We could talk about Ron Jeremy.
Do you want to talk about Ron Jeremy?
My first AVN was my first experience and only experience with Ron Jeremy.
Yeah, tell us about that.
So he came up to me. Well, he didn't come up to me. There was a bunch of girls posing. They let him behind the MFC booth, and he was posing for photos with a couple girls, and I got pulled into that. So I was standing right next to him, and he did his trademark finger under my panties and into my vagina.
Jeez.
Which I was not expecting at all and was disgusting. And so but I was also like brand new. So I just like didn't really know what to do. So I just moved away.
Yeah.
It wasn't traumatic for me, but it was gross.
Right.
Yeah.
And about 2 years later, when I was feeling a little bit more comfortable, I put out a tweet saying, stay the fuck away from him. And that kind of snowballed into what it became, which was him getting banned.
Right. Yeah, we covered that on an earlier episode and used a statement from you, I remember. But that was
that was my first AVN.
Oh, wow.
Wow,
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard that he showed up to Vegas this year, and there was like even a story that they had people on alert at the Hard Rock looking for him in case he tried to enter.
Yeah, I definitely heard that he was walking around the casino ranting about them not letting him in. I didn't see him. I know he was doing an event, a comedy event or something,
right?
Related to everything. But one year they let him into the MFC party, talking about the old MFC parties.
Oh my gosh!
He just showed up at that. So that's like talking about like the difference in vibe, you know. Whereas now it's like you have to have your little wristband, you have to be a chick,
right?
Well, and I think that's also part of the cultural differences, you know, or cultural shift in the event.
Absolutely.
I mean, he represents this idea that the women at the event are up for grabs in a way that it seems like a lot of the cam models are much more resistant to, and like, no, I didn't give you my consent to touch me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because we even saw a little bit of that this year. I mean, there was that one instance where someone was twerking and...
Yeah, I saw this woman twerking, and then a guy came up behind her and started like grinding on her, and her friend was like, "Did you ask consent to do that? Get away from her." And he was like, "What's your problem? Blah, 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 blah," and kind of started a fight there with them, but ended up, just kind of walking away. But it was interesting to see how some of the women like were standing up for other women and really pushing consent.
Yeah, I definitely see consent being pushed a lot more. I've also seen girls being more aware behind the booth, because a lot of what would happen previous years for me I didn't come outside the booth so much. So I wasn't having I wasn't even putting myself in those kinds of situations where people could touch me. But I would have a lot of models come up and slap me without asking, or grab my boobs without asking.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I had more consent, like in the early years, I definitely had more consent violations from other models.
That's interesting.
I did from members. So I've noticed that changing. I would even have people like touch my computer, go on my computer without like asking me and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of a shift on all levels to talking about, consent in a lot of different ways.
I don't think it's just the dudes. I think it's also like the models being more aware of it too.
Yeah, that's a really good shift.
Very good. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, important. It seems important. And also there's been a lot of talk about like, when will porn get its Me Too moment, and is consent really being taken seriously? But it's good to hear that, at least on some levels at these conventions that there are notable changes in the way that people are interacting with each other.
Yeah, and like also in the way that I think the companies are taking better care of us in taking us seriously. I think if I had complained about Ron Jeremy back then, it wouldn't have been a big, like no one would have done anything.
Yeah.
Versus like last year, so 2018, there was an MFC security guard that was on the door. They have an MFC lounge upstairs on the MFC room block that you can go in. And he wasn't doing anything that bad. He was just being too flirty.
Okay. Yeah.
He shouldn't have been doing as a security guard. And there was a couple times he made like flirty comments, and my room was like right across the hall. So he could see where my room was. And then one time I came back upstairs, and I was wearing just a robe and body paint.
Okay.
And I was exhausted, but I went to the lounge to grab a couple waters, and he asked me for a picture, and I was like, no, like, I'm too tired.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, and he got pissy with me because he said, like, well, what the hell? You're taking them down on the floor. You can't take one with me or something like that. And I was over it. So I walked away. Well, I complained to a model, and she complained to MFC, and it got back to the staff like within an hour, I think. And then Alex, who is one of the MFC, he's basically like the event manager for MFC's events, found me later that night and was like, hey, what happened? Told him what happened. He's like, oh, I already fired him. Like,
oh, that's
the guy
awesome.
was gone.
Yeah.
So they were like right on top of that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Which
So
I don't think would have happened a few years ago. I think they're way more aware of that.
Right.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a tremendous shift. Because I think even when we were getting started in the industry, 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't have the sense that there was that level of responsiveness to those concerns. I think that's increased pretty significantly in the last few years, that there's more conversation.
Yeah. Last year, one of my friends got attacked, basically. And MFC, she was a newish MFC model, and they gave her a private security escort the entire rest of the convention.
Oh, that's good.
I think those are important changes. I'm glad we covered all of that. Those are important issues to cover when you're talking like history.
Yeah. Oh, I do have one last little thing for you.
Sure.
So I can probably talk about it now. I couldn't back then. So 2 years ago, I think, the badges that they gave out had a QR code on them.
Mm.
And of course, we scanned our own QR codes. And when we did that, we found it took us straight to a website that had our first and last name displayed and nothing else.
Whoa. What?
Yeah, no, this happened. So basically, we obviously everybody scribbled out their QR codes, but we couldn't say it publicly because as soon as it was public, everyone would start scanning them.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it was all under, everyone was just passing the word DM and, talking personally to each other.
Yeah.
And then my dumbass assumed somebody would have said something. So it rolls around to I think the Friday, and it's still there. And so I made the time to go in to the talent sign up and ask to talk to someone. And the manager, as soon as he came out, I told him what was going on, and his face went white, and he ran off and changed it, and it was immediately fixed. But
that's a huge oversight, though.
Yeah, it's a privacy issue. Yeah.
Massive oversight. And I don't know if maybe that's related to porn stars usually have their names leaked at some point versus cam girls are much more careful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's shocking to me, actually.
Yeah.
I was pretty shocked. And, I didn't talk about it at all. I don't think I've actually really, it's well known. You can ask other people, they'll confirm this.
Yeah.
But I didn't really want to talk about it because I wasn't sure. Immediately afterwards, there could be pictures of QR codes or, I just wanted to make sure.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Because you don't want to spark curiosity and then have a bunch of creeps go look up all that
or
information.
Someone took a selfie with someone and then zoomed in on their name tag and.
Exactly. But it's a couple years later now, and I'm pretty sure all that information's wiped, so I feel comfortable talking about it.
But still, that's wild. So you think that they were just doing that because there was this assumption that information's out there, and they didn't take account of the fact that for cam models, it isn't out there.
I think also sometimes it's just to do with the fact that the people that they get into staff conventions are not trained in the adult industry.
Oh,
so
yeah.
When you go to a regular convention, having a QR code that when you scan it pops up with your real name wouldn't be an issue.
Right.
Last year, I was given the wrong badge. And when I came back and said, hey, you've given me the wrong badge, the lady flipped around the card and said, this isn't you. And it was another model's real name. She had just given me her badge. So I now had her real name and her model name, and her real name happened to have the same last name as me.
Oh,
so she just outed that model's information to me. And then I said, no. And I was trying to tell her, and there's a line of people behind me as well, other models. So, and then she starts flipping around other names, real names, not associated with their model names, but a whole bunch of girls' real names, and started showing them to me. And I was just like, what are you doing?
Wow.
Right.
But that was the AVN staff. Now, I mentioned this. I complained about this to an MFC staff member, and I heard that it got back to Leo because he went off on them. So I think there's a disconnect there between just the AVN staffing understanding what their needs of their particular talent is versus the companies that are actually running it.
Right. Yeah. And again,
they were much better this year.
That's good to know. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they're adapting to, I guess, basically a different reality than, what existed at AVN 10 years ago. I'm sure mainstream performers aren't excited about having their real names leaked, but they're probably not as defensive about it as the indie models or cammers.
Yeah, I think especially having their names, like obviously the badge thing was bad for everybody, but in terms of like having your name outed to other performers, that is more of an issue for cam models, I think, because in the porn industry, you're working with a lot of people.
Right.
Versus in cam models, a lot of cam models never work with anyone, or if they do, they don't do their paperwork and they don't share information.
Right. Yeah.
No, that's a really important point. Yeah, you're not signing 50 contracts with,
They probably should be, but
yeah.
Right.
Well, but a lot of folks, are just working from their own home, or at least, that's how it's been historically. We're seeing a lot more trade content these days, but for many years, the industry really was the focus was on individual models working solo from their homes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's definitely a different thing when people are like learning to navigate. Every shoot that I went to this year, though, every model had forms ready, which is new.
Yeah. That's interesting.
That's another thing that I'm really interested in as a shift. It seems like increasingly AVN is becoming a site where content is being produced and not just a place where people go to network, that it's actually becoming like a work site in a different sense than kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's definitely like when I started, the goal was to be on cam all the time. So you'd go to the booth and be on cam, and then we'd go back to like whatever place we were at in cam. And I started doing more content than a lot of people. Like a lot of people that I knew were just kind of recording their cam shows. This was back in like 2011, 2012.
Right.
So I kind of started pushing for more content around that period. I'm seeing it be higher on people's priority list now.
Right.
Versus not. And I think that maybe came with mini vids because I was on Clips for Sale and then I would sell my videos on MFC.
Yeah.
But not a lot of people were on Clips for Sale because it's a hard site to navigate.
Okay.
Right.
In terms of like cam models, I'm specifically talking about like cam models on MFC would just sell their videos on MFC and they wouldn't really delve into putting them on clip site. And a lot of the times like those clip sites were fetish oriented, whereas most of your MFC content was not.
Right.
And then ManyVids kind of filled that gap.
Yeah.
And so now models are used to using content as a major thing.
I get the sense that some people go to AVN not even to be on the convention floor and are primarily there just to shoot with other models.
Yeah, no, there's definitely girls that never touch the convention floor. They never go near it. They're too nervous. They don't want to meet members, whatever. I also know dominatrixes that don't go on the convention floor because they charge a lot for meetups in general. Like it would be like $1,000 to meet them, even just to see them in person. So they are going to make content and network at the parties.
Right.
Versus like meeting people. So yeah, I would definitely say there's a lot more going on in terms of content and industry only networking events versus meeting people in that like fan environment where you've got members and all of that.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting. I think that's, I don't know, like a microcosm for these shifts in the industry more broadly.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, where can people find your stuff?
They can find all the content I made at AVNs this year.
Yeah.
Well, it's not done that.
Actually, let me ask you this. Did you shoot with other models while you were there?
Yeah, at times.
That's nice. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I made a lot of content. I was there 8 days, so I was there.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But yeah, no, we actually rented another model rented a big suite at a different hotel and set that up for us to make content, which was really awesome. And then I was making content literally till I went to the airport. Actually, at the airport, we made some content at the airport too.
Oh, wow.
In the bathroom, not like anything crazy. One of the girls I was shooting with, Fuka, had a scene where she was wearing a chastity belt and was being sent home in the chastity belt. So we put her in the chastity belt in the bathroom.
Oh, wow. Okay. So where can people find all of your content?
So they can go to Twitter, which is Miss Lollipop MFC. And they can also find me on My Free Cams. All my content is on MFC Share, which is MFC's new clip site. on MFC, I'm just Miss_Lollipop. And then I'm also on ManyVids, Clips for Sale, and I Want Clips. But Twitter has all those links in a pinned tweet at the very top, so it's nice and easy to find.
Nice. Thanks so much for going over that history with us today.
Yeah, sorry for rambling so much.
No, not at all.
Really great.
It was all super relevant, so we appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us for yet another episode of the Peep Show podcast. I'm PJ Sage, and you can find me on Twitter at PeachSage.
And I'm Jessie Sage, and you can find me on Twitter at sapiotextual or at jessiesage.com.
We would like to remind you that we have a Patreon account and would appreciate your support. Please visit patreon.com/peepshowpodcast. Our music is courtesy of Joe Kennedy. The show was produced by Jessie and PJ Sage.
Signing off. Have a great week.